You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right, let's talk about breakup day cap, right? So you bringing all this business experience, this sort of past business experience, building these systems and everything to what you do now. What do you think gives break of day an advantage? Obviously, you're looking at multifamily, you're looking at these kind of Phoenix and Tucson markets, but those are very, Phoenix particularly is a very competitive market, right? You're going up against very sophisticated people. You're not out in the middle of nowhere, right? So why do you think break of day has such an advantage in that market? You mentioned you get there first, right? Like, is it, I guess my question is, why do you think that is? Is it something about how you approach the logistics of the business? Is it something about how you evaluate deals? What, if you had to put your finger on what gives you an advantage, what would you say?
Yeah, I think, we've underwritten deal. I'll tell you one example. So we were out to dinner with a broker celebrating a deal we just bought from him. And he was telling us about this student housing thing that he's got. He didn't really think we would be interested in student housing, but when he was telling me, this is how much it is per unit, this is the size of the units, I'm like, this makes sense. We would want this. We left dinner after having a few drinks, it was 9:00 at night, and went to the hotel and underwrote that deal that night because this sounded like a great deal. We walked the property the next morning, submitted an offer that night, had a conference call with the seller the day after that, made an offer, and he's like, "Can you get this done in 45 days?" And we're like, "Yeah, we could do that," and we got it done. But if we didn't move that fast, it wouldn't have been ours. It would have gone on the market. Perhaps it would be a very competitive bid, and that's just one example. And it wasn't our business plan was convert the student housing to multifamily. And so during, I had a very small window before our money went hard to talk to the city of Tucson, talk to a zoning attorney, get all these different things to make sure this could happen. And we felt comfortable enough to proceed. And, we took a 52% occupied building and within, 7 months, got it up to 95% occupied. We got the approval on breaking up the units. We created just a ton of value in a very, very short time that I don't, a lot of people would have seen right away.
Okay. First of all, listening to that story is very inspiring because I think there's a tendency for a lot of people, myself included. Anytime I say a lot of people have a tendency, I'm really talking about myself, right? So there's a tendency in a lot of people to overthink and delay decision-making because you don't want to do the wrong thing, right? And so it strikes me that you're able to kind of see what's there and move very quickly. Do you think that's just a certain tolerance for risk? Do you not think of it as tolerance for risk because you just see the idea very clearly? Why do you think you were willing to jump on that so quickly, where I think a lot of people would want to, no, they're going to do some research, they're going to think about it. Why do you think you were able to jump on that the way that you did?
Part of it is reps, underwriting so many deals and putting my eyes on deals and walking properties and getting a feel for it. So the numbers made sense to me. My biggest concern was, okay, can we, will the city approve this and whatnot? And so I called, 10 different people from the city to get to the right person, to get a feel from them. Then called the lawyer. Hey, have you worked with this person? What do we triangulated all these different things and make sure to protect our investors, to make sure that this made sense. So I knew I wasn't going to continue forward if it just didn't make sense, but I was going to work nonstop until we figured that out. And, we had a number of different people on our team, all working on it, talk to 10 different people to get to the right zoning attorney in Tucson that knows, that it was the best. And so it was all hands on deck to make sure. But it's not like going back. Okay, I'm gonna chill out, read my emails, this and that. Like it was immediate action, and I've had reps like that, and so it's just boom, let's go to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I wasn't even thinking of it like that, but we mentioned pattern matching earlier in the episode, right? Where you're talking about you're really focused on a specific market. It gives you more sort of, you say reps, I always say at bats, right? You have a certain number of at bats. You start to see patterns, get an intuitive sense. And I think intuition has sort of a bad reputation, but I think intuition is extremely powerful. It is based on data, right? It's just processed at a level that's maybe below spreadsheet level, we could call it that, right? So, I mean, that is really interesting to me. It strikes me too, there's something about your background that I find really interesting is you have such an entrepreneurial background besides real estate, right? Like I think when we were talking before, it's like, I think you had a food delivery service when you were in college, right? You did film, right? So you were co-producing. I think you wrote and directed a film. You have the business working with the at-risk youth and doing leadership development. Now you're doing Breakup Day Capital. You're in multifamily real estate. So this is a very varied entrepreneurial background, right? It's not like I was at Goldman Sachs and then I moved to Bear Stearns and then I moved to Chase or whatever. Like these are all over the place. I'm wondering if the way you think about business, do you notice certain lessons or mindsets or even systems that have kind of emerged across all of your different entrepreneurial experiences, right? Like, is it like to you, are all businesses at their core very similar? Is it not like that? It's like, no, the context is totally different. It's a totally different skill set every time. What have you taken away from being in so many different industries over the course of your entrepreneurial life?
I think it's all about people. I've gotten a hell of a lot better dealing with people. I'm certainly not an expert, but it all comes down to people and building your team. Real estate is a team sport. Like all the different things is working with other people, other experts that you could bring on that can help you get there, and treating people right and getting them on board or getting them to feel empowered to help you has led to my success. It's certainly not singular, but people wanting to help and creating win-win scenarios for people has provided rocket fuel for me. And you can't go very far just by yourself. Certainly you can do well, but to get to those next levels, you need other people on board. And so it's pretty much everything is a people business.
I mean, I love that. It's such a good reminder to keep in mind. I think investors can be very independent minded. I know I am. Like entrepreneurial people, we're used to solving problems. We get rewarded for solving problems, and it leads you to a tendency to be like, well, if there's a problem, I'll just solve it, right? It's quicker for me to do it. That's the classic entrepreneur's myth. It's just, well, it's faster if I do, right? But when you build a team, that's the sort of multiplier effect, right? You can do so much more. I mean, I love the idea that, whether you're doing food delivery or film, or you're doing, leadership, or you're doing real estate, it's all about your team. Let's talk about Breakup Day Capital. So breakupdaycapital.com, you can go there, check it out. I highly recommend, actually, for folks listening to this, they know I'm an online marketing person. It's a great website. It's a really nice looking website. Not every real estate investing website is how we would say good. It's a really nice one. But not only that, you have a book out, you have a podcast. Let's talk about that a little bit. Explain to people what the book is. You can grab it right off the homepage. If you go to breakupdaycapital.com, there's a button you can click, the Multifamily Passive Investor's Guide. Talk a little bit about this kind of thing that you've created, and also a little bit about why you decided to do this specifically, because it's hard. Writing is hard, right? It's not easy. So
yeah, well, that's just like an ebook, but I did write Best in Class, which you could find behind me. That's an Amazon bestselling book.
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
Okay, well let's talk about that then. So let's talk about best in class. So tell people about this book and also why you decided to write this book in the first place.
Yeah, so that is everything about asset management, from due diligence to takeover to driving income to taxes, KPIs, and eventually selling it. So the whole gamut. And I don't think there's anything out there like it. So whenever I go to a conference or something, there's always people that come up to me like, I read your book, I love it, it's helped me so much. But I decided to write it. I wrote it with a business partner at the time for us to get better, first of all, by putting on paper. And if we didn't know something, we'd have them on our podcast and like interview them. So, and then we'd have the content for the book too. It was always under the thinking that we want to get better at what we do. And so writing a book's gonna help us get better. And it took a long time to write the book. It's because you finish, you send it for edits, they send it back to you, and you have to go through it again. And you're like, oh, I got to read this like for the 50th time,
Yeah.
But it has served me well, and it's also allowed me to kind of build a brand around it, and really, and provide, for investors, something that they can, give me credibility for,
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you find that it's been a real boost to your authority? I think that's a reason that a lot of people will point to do a book. A book feels much more serious than like a YouTube video or whatever, right? Whatever it is. Yeah. Have you found that that's like kind of a really good calling card for you, like sort of an introduction?
Absolutely. I've spoken at a lot of different conferences, and so I'm like considered one of the like asset management guys out there because of the book.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I think anytime I see somebody who's written a book, I'm very impressed because I've tried to write a book before and it is not easy. So it's when you were writing it, the actual process of writing it, how did you tackle it? Did you do it? Some people always say like, oh, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. I just sat at the desk and I typed exactly until the timer went off and then I stopped. Or were you kind of more wait for the urge to strike you? Like, how did you actually get it out? Does it make sense?
Yeah. So started with just all the different chapters. So that kind of created a roadmap, and knowing like, okay, each chapter is going to be 10, 15 pages, plus or minus. So just having that roadmap helped. And then for me, I'm a guy that, just get it down, get my basic ideas down, fine tune it. But if I like worry about each word and whatnot, forget it. I can't do it. I need to let like kind of the juices flow, and sometimes they're flowing, sometimes they're not. So just get some basic ideas. Then days that I'm flowing, then boom, I can write, the whole chapter, and it looks great. But a lot of times it's just fine tuning it. And it's funny because the guy I was writing with, he writes differently. Like he wants it perfect the first time. And, and he's like, why are you sending me this? It's not done. I go, I know it's not done. I need like a couple iterations. That's how I work, but, you stay committed and try to give yourself some deadlines.
Yeah.
And so it just keeps you moving forward. Because if you don't have deadlines, it could take forever, but I can't have a gun to my head and say, I'm going to write between this hours typically, but everyone is different. Some of the best writers, that's what they do. They have that slot and they write during that time.
Yeah, I also do not write that way, but I very similarly, like probably the longest thing I've ever written was I wrote a master's thesis when I was graduating from college, right? And it's, there's an obvious deadline. It has to be due, but it has to be done. So it's like you start to get in the groove and really get it out. I mean, so I think that approach makes a lot of sense. I'm curious that you mentioned the podcast. So you have a podcast. It's called the Real Estate Asset Management Podcast. And you can find it anywhere that you go out and get your podcast. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, you'll be able to find that one. Just Google Real Estate Asset Management, Gary Lipsky, you will find it. So tell me a little bit about the decision to do the podcast, right? You guys you got a bunch of episodes out. You've been doing it for a while. So like, why the podcast? Was that you mentioned was it in preparation for the book? Was it kind of networking? Was it all the above? Why jump into the podcasting game?
Yeah, it was really for educational purposes. I wanted to bring on the best operators and things that I didn't know about or wanted to know more about. And that's why we started it. And it wasn't about the journey of real estate. It was about a specific topic in asset management, 10, 20 minutes, boom, about, and then move on to the next topic. And so that was the driver, quite honestly, and using some of that content for the book. And it's made me a better operator. It's built my network. I built, good relationships with other good operators because of that podcast. So, and it's gotten me on other people's podcasts. So it's really worked out well for me. I know there's a million podcasts out there, and separating yourself isn't easy. And we had a pretty niche topic to help separate ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it obviously mine is very similar, right? It's real estate investing and marketing. I don't know if this has been your experience. My experience has been like, we don't do hundreds of thousands of downloads of the podcast, right? The podcast is a niche topic, a niche audience. What I do find is that there's something about the medium that is very intimate. And so we'll tend to get people who will come in and say, I'm ready to work with you. You don't need to sell me. I'm just ready to go. And almost always those people will say, I've been listening to the podcast for 2 years, 3 years, something like that, right? They have a relationship with you before they're ready to work with you. Has that been your experience? I mean, we find it to be such a powerful sort of relationship builder, even if we don't know that the relationship is being formed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Social media, podcasts, the book, all these different avenues, there's not one thing that captures someone per se, but people are following and listening to you that you don't know. And they're like, okay, now I'm ready, and out of the blue.
Yeah, I like this whole, I feel like in general, there's a lot of people have a very buttoned down or buttoned up or whatever, right? Like, so very tight social media presence. It's very systematic or whatever. And then I think there's a lot of people, and I would kind of put you in this category where you're talking about things you are clearly interested in and clearly skilled in, and you are yourself, right? I mean, there's not really like this, like, you're not doing the whole, whatever. I like Gary Vaynerchuk, but you're not doing the thing where it's like, hey, here's my brand. I'm this guy, like I'm this guy. It's personal. People can form a relationship to you. I mean, if people haven't checked out the podcast, again, I highly recommend it. It's a real estate asset management podcast. I didn't know anything about asset management before I listened to it. Now I feel like I know some, so I think it's pretty awesome. So we're coming up on time. I want to wrap things up. I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm really curious, because again, questions that I'm curious about, right? Thinking about your goals for Break of Day Capital, right? You've had so much success already. Do you think about your goals for the company and like, we're trying to hit X amount of revenue, or we're trying to hit X amount of doors, or I guess, how do you think about the future of your company, right? Because it would be easy for you if you wanted to scale this one up to have another 700 employee company if you really wanted to, right? So like, you have so many different directions you can go. How do you think about your future and the goals that you set for yourself?
Yeah, I do get asked that question, like, what's your end goal or this or that, and how many units or whatnot. And I think units or assets under management can be a dangerous thing, because most importantly, I want to do good deals. And I'm not going to do a deal just because it adds a number to, my resume.
Mm-hmm.
I invest in these deals. And I've got the fiduciary responsibility of all my investors. So I want to keep doing good work and creating win-win scenarios for my investors, for the residents. Yeah, I'd love to have a huge number on my resume, but that's not the driver. That's a result of doing good work. So the most important thing is finding good deals, creating a lot of value. And I don't need to be $1 billion company, a $2 billion company. We'll probably get there. But thankfully, I don't have to have this kind of constant whip, to keep driving and driving and driving. Let's do good work. Let's do it right. And, we're and enjoy our lives too, have some balance. And certainly I've been working my butt off for a long time, but there's got to be, it's really important for myself and for my team to have some semblance of balance too, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's like, have you had fun? Do you have your health?
I was just going to say, like, you're working your butt off, but you strike me as someone who you're working your butt off, but it is fun to you to do that up to a certain point, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I had a conversation earlier in the day before we talked. I was on the call with the guy who does I have like a nutrition coach, because if I don't have an adult looking over my shoulder, I will eat like a 4-year-old. It's just the way that I am. So I have an adult, I pay to look over my shoulder, and he's this massive muscled guy with a motorcycle, handlebar mustache, super tough, super strong guy. And so I was asking him, like, what should I set for my goal? Like, should my goal be, body fat is here, or I'm going to lift 1,000 pounds or whatever, right? We're talking about goals. And he was saying the problem with goals is if you set a goal that's like, I'm going to, do X thing, the second you get there, it's over. And then what do you do next? It's like, it just never stops, right? He's like, your goal should be show up every day and work the system. So the system is show up in the gym or follow your diet plan or whatever it is. But you should be like, check off the boxes that you did it every day, whether you wanted to or not. And the result will take care of itself, right? And it strikes me that, like, you're a really good example of that. You are clearly showing up and having fun. You've started like 5 businesses, more than anybody else I've ever known. You are killing it in all of them. And it kind of comes across in your personality, right? That you enjoy what you do. And that's the success is almost a byproduct.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, Gary, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, if you are listening to this, you want to check out more about what Gary is up to. His name is Gary Lipsky, and you can get to him at breakofdaycapital.com. That's capital with an A at the end, breakofdaycapital.com. You can go there, check out his ebook, amazon.com. You can go check out Best in Class as well. Obviously, go check out the Real Estate Asset Management podcast. Anywhere else? Did you do social media? Like, do you want people to follow you on social media? Anything like that?
Yeah. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So check us out, follow us, and stay in touch.
All right. Gary, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really, really appreciate it. This was awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it. Had a lot of fun. Thanks, Dan.
That is it. That's it for our interview this week. Please, 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 folks, if you're listening to this, it would really mean a lot to me. Go and leave us a review wherever you download your podcasts. I read every single one. It helps other people find the show. And I got to say, doing this show over the last couple of years has been one of the most rewarding parts of my job. I really appreciate that you take the time to listen to this every week. And if I can help you, or if you have questions, just reach out to us. Let us know. I am here to help. As always, this is Daniel Barrett from AdWordsNerds.com signing off, and I will see you next week. Cheers.
This is the podcastfactory.com.